Hello, my name is Daniel Hoog. I'm director of Art Cologne, and this is Josh Baer from the Baer Faxt. Um, so I think we're just going to have a conversation with each other. Can you hear me? Is this okay?
I'll talk loud. That's too loudly.
Okay.
Okay. Can before we start talking, it helps me to understand who the audience is. So if you're an artist, can you raise your hand? Okay. If you're a gallerist, collector, okay. Here for the free food. I suppose we could say journalist and critic too, even though they don't really count anymore. Sort of. Do we have any journalists here? Okay. I'm not one really. Hey, Daniel, how are you?
Good. How are you? It sounds like you're all the way across the room with this.
It's only 30 years since I was at Art Cologne where I had a booth.
That's right. You had a gallery, Josh Baer Gallery.
I thought it was a good idea to name it after myself, but I think I was here around 1989. Is this the same building?
No, no. We moved. Our cologne used to be in the Rhine Park Holland, which are the beautiful brick halls just towards the Rhine River from here. And Hall 11 is. I made that move in 2010. My predecessor, Gerard Goodrow, had to move the fair because the building it had to be renovated, and so it was easier to sell the building to the city and build new industrial halls.
And it's Cologne's fault for this whole art fair thing, for starting this like merry-go-round of every month, different art fair around the world. It's Cologne's fault.
Yeah, it's Cologne's fault.
It's your fault. You did this to us.
It's Heinz Stünke's fault from Galerie der Spiegel and Rudolf Zwirner, the father of David, they both had galleries in Cologne and came up with the idea to do an art fair. So you just came back, you just arrived from New York, from being at the New York auctions.
We've had 2 weeks of auctions, and I think the takeaway that didn't surprise me, but that seemed to surprise the world, that the art market was still alive and still strong. I didn't doubt it, but I think the media went for the easy route of, oh my God, there's wars going on, interest rates are high, it's a speculative bubble, blah, blah, blah. And $2 billion worth of art transacted in about the last 8 days. That's a lot.
Yeah. I looked at some of the sales results from the big auction houses, and it struck me as okay. I mean, there were a lot of works that were bought in, but most works fell within the estimated values. So it wasn't. I mean, I read one article that said that the auctions were lackluster. So I'm not sure what were they.
I don't even know what that means, anyways. I mean, they're always lackluster. I've been to 1,000 of them, and believe me, it's kind of pathetic to have been to 1,000 auctions. It's like, unless it's your painting being bought or sold, you're kind of just watching other people spend money. I mean, how luster can that be? So it's kind of like a large part of it is, anybody watch like house shows on TV? They have them here like, oh, there's this mansion for 52 million euros. I want to look at that. It's kind of pornography. So a lot of the auction, the art market is kind of porn because there's only a couple hundred people actually participating, the stars, and then the rest of the world is sort of watching it. So, I mean, it relates to your ability to run the fair. I'm an art advisor. I had works for clients to bid on and to sell. So it matters. But in the overall scheme of things, it gets a lot of attention. And just to sort of come around on it, it's all an illusion. Okay. If the illusion of the sales is good, everybody is like, wow, I can buy art here because maybe I'll sell it at Sotheby's in 30 years. Or the other illusion is it sold well. That's defined by this thing called the estimate. 1 million to 2 million. If it sells for 3, it did great, even though it should have sold for 5. So would it be better that it sold for 3, estimated 1 to 2, or sold for 4, estimated 5 to 7? Well, I'm going to tell you, if you're the seller, it's better the other way. So it's all a bit of theater on top of it being $2 billion, which is probably what McDonald's sold in that period of time, right? Just to put in context.
Yeah. I mean, what I find funny is that, or interesting, is that the auction houses already know before the auction how much interest there is. So I mean, they kind of put their feelers out and are like, you think this thing is going to sell for this much, and then there's also guarantees, but sometimes they even pull works before the auction if they know that there's zero interest in the work. Like if no one calls them to do telephone bidding, or
I think the thought is they're sitting there at Christie's waiting for the phone to ring. And like, oh, somebody's emailed me. I want to buy this Andy Warhol. It's not like that. It's very proactive on their part, where they have such big teams because there's one lady in Stuttgart that likes, polkas from the 60s. They know her. They're calling her. It's a proactive thing. They've done everybody's appraisals. They know who has what. And they're basically data companies in a way, and they're art companies. So they're trying to combine technology, being a tech company in some ways, a data company, and an art company. It's like, you need to have that sense here too of like, what's going to be commercially valuable for this fair versus what's going to be good art for this fair. And you're always trying to play around with those two things. And your job, and I'm saying it's analogous to specialists the auction house, is how to balance and make that sweet spot and satisfy two sets of clientele, the buyers and the sellers.
Yeah. The kind of theatrics and illusion of the art market is also very much present in the work of galleries. But
it's important at the art fairs. I mean, I went to an art fair last year and I got a press release at 10:01 that the gallery had sold out its booth. Fair opened at 10. So it's like, really, 1 minute. They sold 14 paintings for an average of $300,000. That's hard to do. So there's a theatric and illusion of the galleries sending press releases saying they sold this, saying things are great. It's all this false notion of transparency.
Yeah, I mean, yes, I agree with that. But on the other hand,
when you say "but," that means you don't.
No, but I do know of one very important gallery that here comes to Cologne, and they've been in discussion regarding works, and the collectors come to the fair and they look at the work and then they say, yes, I'll take it. It's like, I want it, but I really want to have a look at it in person before.
In that old fashioned thing of, let me see the artwork before we buy it.
Yeah.
That's generally a good rule of thumb.
But one thing about the German art market that's very interesting and something I really love is and nothing against art consultants. I think art consultants play an important role, but it's a lot of the German collectors still like to make their own decisions, and they go look at work and they I like that. And
as an art advisor, consultant, my clients make their own decisions.
Yeah, of course.
So,
then tell us about that.
I'm saying sometimes they can't physically see it. So you have to be their eyes and understand what to look at, and having discussed it. So I would say one of us needs to see it. Now, during lockdown, that became difficult. Though there was a big business in New York of people showing art at the biggest private airport. Somebody would fly a painting in, open the crate, somebody else would fly in. They would never see each other, and the painting would transact and get on the plane. But that was, we got a little bit used to the PDFs and the JPEGs and the speed of things, of looking. And I think the rebound of the art fairs is because people want to smell it in person, which is good, right?
Yeah. I mean, there was a story that my predecessor told me at Art Cologne one year. Gerhard Richter painting was in the stand of one gallery, and that painting sold, or it turned over. It changed hands 8 times
During the fair,
and it was still hanging in the original gallery's booth by the time the 8th person who bought it for, I don't know, a price that was maybe 10 times higher than what the original gallery was asking for.
Well, that buyer didn't have a very good art advisor.
Yeah.
Exactly.
No, and you're right. You're right. There are, in other cases, not every work by every artist is equal. Yeah. You have good examples of works by certain artists. You have bad examples. You have weak examples. You have, people are like, oh, that's not a very good, I don't know. That's not a good Cindy Sherman. That's a great Cindy Sherman. So I agree. I was at a collector's house, a young collector's house a couple of years ago. And we were talking about art, and he said, oh, we got on the subject of Günter Uecker, and I said, yeah, it's actually it's pretty high price right now. Oh no, but I got a great price, and I was like, yeah, you got to watch out, those there's a certain series of prints, Prägedruck, where it's not drawn, but and you really have to watch out with those because they tend to be overpriced. And then he showed it to me, and voila, it was exactly what I was talking about, what you should avoid. And I was so embarrassed. I was really like, oh shit. I thought he had bought like an actual unique original work. So, yes, there are good reasons to have an art advisor.
Well, we have so much more information readily available that makes us believe we're educated. So we're highly informed, but we're not necessarily that educated. And it's, again, issues of quality, issues of condition, for me, history, when something was made. And I think, we all have a way that we look at art. So how do we start? It's like shifting a little bit, but it's like I look at when something was made, the history. My wife looks at the beauty. Okay. Both valid ways. And then we sort of start winding our way to see if we can get to the same place. I think, you walk through here, there's thousands of pictures. How do you process all this? What are you looking for? What information are you taking in? And more importantly, how are you getting your information? So in terms of that, people who collect art can be really incredibly siloed in their knowledge. They know everything about Günter Uecker. The good year, the bad year, what it means, and then you mention another artist, they go, who's that? And that's normal for a collector because they have jobs. Now, if you're a gallerist or a critic or a curator, you need to also be broad. So it's like, how do you get all that information? There's millions of artists. There's billions of galleries. How would you sort through that? It's like, you need to actually think this through as advice, like, what am I doing? How am I even walking around here? Do I go down the middle areas? Do I try to find things I already know about? Am I looking for just something to grasp my eye? How do you process that? How do you do it when you walk in a fair? What do you do?
Well, when I walk through the fair, I look
Not
at,
your fair, a different fair.
oh, when I look at different fairs, well, it's hard to kind of get to, I like to, like, all right, let's talk about, I think everyone can relate to this. Basel, it took me about 15 years of visiting Art Basel to finally figure out how to navigate the fair layout to see everything. Because I would always do the circle on the inside, and then I'd do the circle on the outside, and then I kind of hit, bomb the specific galleries I wanted to go visit and say hi to. And that was it. And I finally figured out you just start in one corner, you go all the way up, and you zigzag your way back and forth, and you'll actually get through it.
Which floor do you start on? There's the super expensive stuff versus the very
That
expensive
depends
stuff.
what I'm wearing. All right. So
If you're wearing a suit, you start with the less
no,
expensive.
if I'm wearing a suit, I go downstairs to the modern. If I'm wearing jeans and a t-shirt, I go upstairs to the contemporary. I'll go to Lista. If I'm really casual, if I'm wearing a suit, yeah. I mean, it kind of does, but it's also the days. I don't like to go.
By the way, wearing a suit is a giveaway that you're not a buyer. Just so you know, it's the guys with the sneakers that cost $800. The
Yeah.
jeans, they're not ripped. Those are the buyers. So the suit, you're either an art advisor or you're just like got dressed up for the fair.
Andrew Krebs told me a story once at the Armory show when it was on the piers. So Andrew Krebs is a New York gallery. Started in the early mid '90s. Anyway, he said this really poorly dressed man in acid washed bell bottoms and a kind of a dirty T-shirt came into his booth with a Russian accent, and he's like, how much is this work? And he's like, good, I'll take it. And he's like, well, where should I send? He's like, can I take it now? Can I ship it now? And he's like, yeah, sure. Where to? And he's like, and he pointed to a boat through the windows into the Hudson River. And it was a mega yacht. And he's like, there. And it was just so, it is right. You never know who are the buyers. And it's in LA. I remember doing the Art LA fair. It was kind of a lull. There were just people around me, and I was kind of standing there bored. And I saw this kind of lost looking woman and a couple. They looked really like average Americans, kind of lost. Like they really looked lost. And I figured they were looking for the toilets. And I went to them and I said, can I help you with anything? And I really felt like I was doing them a huge favor, like telling them where the toilets are. But I just happened to have some time and I was bored. And she's like, yes, how much is that work and the work around the corner? And they ended up buying 3 works from me. And it was like a major collector couple from Seattle, Washington that were in the computer tech, whatever.
My favorite story is a friend of mine, Irish. She was like a poor, starving artist, and she took a childhood friend around Soho. This was in the 90s, and she went to one of the big galleries, in Ronald Feldman Gallery. And the guy says, how much is that work? And they say, it's very expensive. And it goes, okay, what's the price? It's like, it's expensive. After like 10 minutes, they got to it was $25,000. It was Bono. Okay. They didn't recognize him. And he's like, please, can I just, didn't you just tell me? And U2 was a big band back then. It's like, because the art world doesn't follow pop culture so well always. But I will say about that couple, when I was a kid, there's a famous collectors named Herb and Dorothy Vogel. And there's a great film about these collectors. They're about this tall. He was a postman, and she was a librarian. And they would hang out at the Cedar Bar, meeting artists starting in the 50s. And they'd meet the artists. They wouldn't say anything. And they would buy like a Rauschenberg for $200, $20 a month and something. And they wound up that their collection is in 50 states in museums around America. They lived on the salary of the postman, and they bought on the salary of the librarian.
Librarian.
In a 1-bedroom apartment. It's a great story. It can't happen anymore.
I think, well, hold on. I think it's timing. It's got a lot to do with timing, because at that point in time, people were, I mean, you had the Skulls. The Skulls were buying them.
But he was rich.
Yeah, but the Skulls were, I think, the only ones who were buying Rauschenberg. There were a
You know who was buying all that shit?
Ludwig.
It was the Germans.
Turner.
So Americans had to go over here. That's how you have all this great stuff here, because no one in America was buying that.
Yeah, I mean, all right. So
you think a guy, a postman, a librarian, can now build a great art collection starting today?
No. But I think when the market, market's always correct, and different parts of the market correct at different times and adjust. And I was just talking to a collector from Aachen who buys contemporary art, but he also buys old masters and, antique glass. And he said, the deals he's finding now are fantastic. I mean, for 5,000, you can buy amazing sort of second level old masters. You can't buy anything on the contemporary market with that. I mean, nothing unique, at least. So it's really, I think it's a matter of timing. I think there's been a lot of speculation in the U.S. market, partially through not the good art consultants, but there's also charlatan art consultants who there's just art consultants that have a huge network of very high net.
When I had my gallery, there were maybe 3 art consultants in the world.
Yeah.
30, 40 years ago. Now there's probably 3 in this room. And the term that somebody came up with, Gmail art advisors.
Yeah.
And you don't need a license. You don't need any knowledge. Actually, knowledge is bad. You just need to know somebody with money. And that's always going to end badly in any field.
So you've had a lot of trades. I mean, in the art world, you're well, number one, you grew up with art. I mean, your mother is Joe Baer. How
many saw her retrospective at the Ludwig 10 years ago? Anybody? Okay.
And then you were a gallerist from, I think, 1989 to
85 to 94.
Okay. And
I had a record company. I had a magazine. I represented performers. I did sweeping up construction when I couldn't pay my rent. I did it all.
But the Baer Fact, you're probably most well known for the Baer Facts, and you started that in 1992?
1994, when I closed my gallery, and there was this new thing called the fax machine. Anybody under 25 here not know what a fax machine is? Never heard that little sound go off and went running for the machine that something was coming. Oh my God, it's got to be important. Okay, so 1994, there was big technology switch. And the thing about so I did this newsletter. It was sent by fax with a play on words. Because in the narrow part of the art world, it's kind of cool if you're someplace and you say, oh, do you know who the new architect for MoMA is? And then everybody at dinner says no. And you say, well, it's so-and-so. How'd you find that out? Or did you know that so-and-so is now showing at this gallery? No. The information is valuable in terms of the art market, and inside information, which is illegal on Wall Street, is good form in the art business. If you don't know that something's happening, and I do, I have an edge. So back then, it took like 2 months for anything to get into Art in America, that someone did this or that. I said, oh, I have this idea. It's kind of like one of the shower ideas, like, oh, I'll do this newsletter. It's like, and subscriber number one was David Zerner, $99. Thank you, David. And it's become kind of like a valuable asset to the art market community, but it's nowhere near as important as what artists and galleries are doing. That it's a tool. We're a content company, so we're, I think we do great stuff, but it's not what a gallery does. You like it?
Yeah. No,
So it's, again, how do you get information? My job, we do podcasts, we do video, we do op-eds with museum people, we do live streaming. It's like, how do we make things accessible and be important knowledge at the same time? It's like, how do we not make things Art World 101 for dummies? And that's, for me, that's always been the goal. In the same way that we were talking about clients liking things, I have clients who don't know very much about art. Okay? They're incredibly successful. They're usually the smartest person in the room. Suddenly they're here and it's like, what's going on? So it's like, how to raise the level of the discourse to a high level without the sort of the rigmarole of, well, it relates to Barbara Kruger's thing that you saw in Venice. You can't play that game. You have to teach in a way that respects the audience and then at the same time gives them real information. And that's, for me, that's a goal. I do it with a very niche part of the big part of the art world. And my ultimate goal is like, how do I communicate as a media company to people like you? It's like, how many people have heard of David Zerner? Raise your hand. Okay. So there you go. He's the most important dealer in the world almost. And like half of you. So it's like, okay, so if I'm talking about him, it's meaningless. Okay. So I have to find a way to talk to people who come on day 3 of an art fair. They bought a ticket for $50. They didn't even get one of these VIP things. And they bought something for 4,000 euros. That's a big audience. That's different than the audience that's buying the, $100 million Picasso. Mm-hmm. So I have that $100 million Picasso audience, but it's also my goal is how do I communicate better to groups like this? That's why I do events like this, to try to like reach out and say that there are ways to learn.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Was there a question?
No, I mean, I would say, I think it's great how, the Baer Faxt was always kind of this insider thing, sort of like the professional to professional within the art world. And I think it's fantastic how you've kind of turning it around and opening it up to a broader audience. And I think that's, to making, the podcasts, social media, all of that is quite, I think that the content's really great. So I think that's that kind of development.
Well, the internet has changed how we get information and news. So people don't even buy the newspaper anymore. So how do we compete with a 24/7 news cycle? It's harder now than it was for a media company. So you have to provide something that's sort of specific there. It's just, I think you have the same challenges. Like, how do you provide for yesterday? Yesterday was the VVIP. It's like for them. And how do you provide for today? Both for the galleries and for the viewers. It's a challenge. It's pretty interesting.
I miss the kind of filter that newspapers provided. You kind of know what, in which direction the news would go when you bought the New York Times, for instance, or if you bought the Wall Street Journal.
But you run across an article. I didn't think I was interested in pig farming. Hey, that's kind of interesting. You don't have that when you're scanning on your phone. So discovery has become more difficult because we're saturated with
Well, it's-
information.
I think it's also about believability, and that's where this whole kind of fake news thing came in. If you have all the news accessible on one channel, you have to kind of make sense of what's real, what's right, what's wrong, and that's where I think we'll see more kind of platforms that provide a filter. I mean, almost like an art consultant, to steer the people. And I think that's super.
I think, again, how do you get information? How many galleries are there here?
170.
170. So if you spent 3 minutes in each one, you'd be here almost 7 hours. 3 minutes in each. And if each one has 20 works of art, let's see, 20 into 3 minutes, that's what, maximum like 8 seconds of work. Undoable. Okay. Same with going to Documenta. They got like 900 hours of video. I'm there for a day. How am I supposed to go look at that show? If Documenta is ever going to happen again, but that's another story. But it's like, so how do we go about it? Do we go to what we already understand? Do we go? I mean, for me, I do something different. It's like, most of it's noise. Most of what's here is noise. Most of what's being sold here in 20 years will be worth zero. Okay. That's just a reality. So it's like, for me, I'm trying to like tune the noise out. So it's like focusing on things that are great. That's my way. Other people are here for different reasons. How much is a ticket?
A ticket?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not sure, to be honest.
It's worth
Marcus, what's costing a ticket?
30 euros. That's
30 euros.
I'm
That's
sure
not
there's
bad.
exceptions for schools and
Yeah.
things
No,
like that. But
have free access.
But actually, that's pretty good value for 30 euros. So like, you can ask a question. You can look at it. Tell me about that work. How much is it? Somebody will talk to you. I mean, it's a great deal.
It's funny that you mentioned Ronald Feldman, because I think Ronald Feldman was the only gallery in Basel who was ever kind of mean to me and refused to tell me the price of something, or just kind of shrugged me off like I was some young idiot, which I probably was at that time.
Listen, I think they should, at an art fair, you have to be a little bit more open to the prices. I went into a gallery in Basel and I said, how much is that Richter? And it says, sold. I said, that's okay. How much were you asking? And they just refused to tell me. And I said, I've got 8 of them that I'd like to sell, but you're rude. And I walked out and they started chasing me. I said, I don't want to talk to you. You're standing there and it's not in your back room or in your house. If you have it at the art fair, you should have a price. I like it when they put the price on the label personally, but I'm told that's bad, but I like it.
I like it. I mean, there's a few galleries here that do it, and it's always kind of a pleasure. What's
It's meant to, if you do that, then you don't start a conversation. Those conversations you're doing aren't leading to the sales probably anyway, so might as well put the price out.
Yeah. Once about, I don't know, this was maybe 10 years ago, I told a journalist during an interview that the gallerists are there in the booth to take questions, to answer questions, and they love talking about their work, the artists they work with, and to explain the work. And what you should do is just talk to them. And sales in our young section, in the Neumarkt section, improved because they suddenly decided to talk. I mean,
I got to say, I walked through and I'd say 80% of the people I saw in the booths were sitting at their laptop, not looking up.
Yeah.
Okay. And by the way, I'm one of the biggest friggin' art consultants in the world. I just walked past them and they barely looked up.
Yeah.
It might be smart, so I'm an old guy with white hair, but just to like be standing and saying, do you have any questions? I don't know. It's kind of like better than shopping on Amazon, looking annoyed that someone's irritating you, or when I did art fairs, I did a bunch of them. I never broke even, but I stood on my feet from minute one to the last day, trying to talk to anybody who came in, because that's what you should be doing if you're having a booth.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, 80% of the people today are sitting there on their laptops.
Well, okay, so I did a lot of them. I did Art Basel Miami Beach for about 5 years. And what I remember is, you have a ton of collectors come in, they whip out their card, they say, how much is that worth? And then they shove their card in your face.
And then you put that into a book.
Send me information.
Yeah.
And then all the galleries are like, look how many contacts I have. And then they spend a week like sending out emails and images and prices. And in Germany, I remember there was an American gallery did the fair, and at the end of the fair, I was like, how was it? And he's like, terrible. No one gave me a card. And he opened his card book and he's like, see, I got one card. And I'm like, in Miami, look, this is Miami. And he shows it's like, brr. And I'm like, well, did they take cards from you? He's like, yes. And Germans are very sensitive about this. They don't just give out their information.
Europeans go that way.
This is what Germans
not just Germans.
This is what Germans do. They're like, how much is this worth? Yeah. And you tell them the price. They're like, thank you. Do you have a card? And then they take the card and they leave. And then the gallery is like, oh, I can send you a PDF. Would you like me to send you a PDF? Are you sure you don't want me to send you a PDF? And it's like, no. And then 3 months later, they'll get a phone call and they'll be like, is that work still available?
It starts with like, hi, I'm Josh. And they say, nice to meet you. And they don't tell their name, because your name as a European, my wife is European, is a very important thing. I mean, this is a culture in Europe of aristocracy, and your name defines you as to where you come from and who you are. So you don't want to play that card. In America, what defines you is what you do and how much you make. Okay. So your name doesn't matter because it's a new country. So Europeans just not going to tell you.
That's true.
That, oh, my name is Arnaud. Okay. Or my name is Von, we've got some people in here that have some titles. A friend of mine was here earlier. That matters in Europe. So it's partially that. It's a remnant of aristocracy.
Is it rude in the U.S. when you meet someone to ask them what they do?
They tell you. It's like,
that's right. Yeah.
Hey, I'm Josh Baer. Did you see my G5 at the airport? I'm like, did my article in Forbes. Here's my card. Send me info. It's a completely opposite kind of thing, and it's easier in some ways, but it's just different.
So what's the mood like in New York, to change the subject? The reason I brought up the auctions was to kind of what's going on in the art world. You're one of the most well-informed people in the art world in New York. What's your, how do you think it's,
Well, there's
dire? Do you think it's going to be?
Well, there's the geopolitical situation. I mean, let's be honest. We're here looking at beauty, trying to see spiritual things, and there's shit out there that's not, it's real. So that's either people have become a little bit immune in the last 2 years on one war, or 1 month, depending on how you define things, in another war. So there's been a sense of shock. And it's waning for some and not waning for others. We certainly in America have an election coming up, and that's just going to get worse and worse. And we're in a point now where people aren't really talking to each other. And
Within the art world.
Just in the world.
Wow.
So I think that's this cloud that's hanging over any of us who have multiple, can walk and chew gum. So I think there's that. Now, art is a funny thing. I often tell people everything about that's why people who come in who are new to it have a hard time. Everything about the art market in the art world is counterintuitive. So while war's going on, don't buy art. Okay. There's something beyond retail therapy that's going on too. I mean, during a war, some people go buy sweaters. I feel better. They drink more, they party, and people buy art. One reason is just to preserve this illusion that things are normal. But I think there's also a desire to be a part of something bigger. A friend of mine would, I'm sort of stealing his line from my next podcast, but there's a notion of trying to connect to things beyond ourselves in a troubling time. And art can be something like that. So that's going on. You've got macroeconomic things going on. And volatility, the things, as you said before, things are always correcting. They're correcting like the stock ticker every day for every artist. So there's pretty much a lot going on. It's just more. The more people, more artists, more galleries, more fairs, more art advisors, less critics. But it's like, we're like,
Huh. I mean, I'm, we had this kind of parking crisis yesterday because of the train strikes throughout Germany, all of Germany.
Was there a big game on last night that they wanted
No,
to
all
watch?
the strikes are out.
Or they didn't strike.
Sorry,
There was a game.
The trains were out anyway, there was no train movement anywhere in Germany. So that meant people from Frankfurt, the cities that are like an hour and a half by train away, many of them didn't come. And then you had a Madonna concert yesterday over here in Langnetz, not too far away. And yeah, all the parking was, everyone came with car. There was a lot of traffic. It was a nightmare. 3 days ago, my director of the fair told me, chances are there's going to be a volcanic eruption in Iceland in the next 2 days. And we had that in 2010, where all the galleries arrived, and the day after, during setup of the fair, there was a volcanic, I think it was called I Want a Yogurt.
They say this volcano will not affect air traffic.
Yes, it won't, because it's not going through a layer of ice, creating fine particulate matter that goes into the atmosphere and clogs up plane engines that makes them crash. So anyway, we had 440 cancellations. It was my second edition of our Cologne. And the way the art world kind of works, collectively, it gets excited about something. It reads about something, not just in Germany, but worldwide. And we had 440 cancellations from Americans to visit the fair. And that meant they lost their plane flights because it was a natural disaster. They didn't get their money refunded. And they did not return in 2011. They didn't come back the next year. It was like a moment we just lost that got flushed away.
Everybody complains about the Americans. Everybody complains
Love
about
Americans
from New York. But in fact, everybody, oh my God, there's somebody here from New York doing a talk. Or, oh my God, where are the Americans? Are the Americans here? It's like it's a love-hate thing.
I do believe that America is the biggest part of the art market. Second, the Chinese. The Claire McAndrews report, Art Basel Art Mark report. I just said that in an interview that the facts are false. I mean, how does Claire McAndrews get auction records to know that the work sold in London, at Sotheby's and Christie's and Phillips, that those works came from British collectors? It's a British sale, but I know a lot of German collectors that if a work is of a certain value and blue chip, they're not going to put it at a small local auction house. They're going to send it to London and auction it there. Or maybe if it's a really hot American artist, they're going to sell it in New York. And so if a European collector sells a work through Sotheby's in London, and then Sotheby's sells it to a Chinese collector, how is that? And then they say, well, Sotheby's has, I think where's Britain in that? 2%. Germany has 2% of the global market. France has 3% of the global
at auction.
No, just according to this is gallery sales. This is auction sales. And then, I spoke to I know a lot of big German galleries. And I said, did Claire McAndrews ever talk to you or ask you to fill out a survey? And they're like, no. Did she call you? No. So, I mean, what do you make of that? What's the take?
I like Claire personally. I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
I will say, just to talk about Asia, in a sense, I think it's a mistake to talk about China. It's makes much more sense to talk about Asia. I've been 3 times this year. I'm doing more and more business there in media ways and selling ways. It is a very complex place, and it's a mistake to say China.
Okay.
Because even within China, mainland China versus Hong Kong versus Taiwan.
Yeah.
And the other thing that's interesting, actually the most interesting thing that I learned in the last year came from a director of an art fair, believe it or not, a guy named Magnus Renfrew, who runs a bunch of art fairs, and one of them is Singapore. And he explained to me something that kind of shocked me, because it was an assumption that I had, that many of us had, is that Western art means the same thing everywhere. And it's like that a Gunter Oecker means the same thing in Germany as it does in Saudi Arabia, as it does in Taipei. And it doesn't. Or that our methods of doing things, sort of the MoMA history of art, or how we run an art fair, that we've always done it that way. That's the right way to do things. And that's a mistake to think that way. So I think we have to be prepared to think in multiple ways. And there's something different about somebody from Berlin than somebody from Munich. Okay. And something different about somebody from Hong Kong and somebody from Beijing versus Indonesia. So there's a lot that's going on out there, that the sound bites go 3%, 5%, this or that. They're missing what's on the ground. And I will say this about what I do, I can talk about the art market as a journalist because I'm in the art market. If you're a lawyer, anybody here is a lawyer? Doctor? Real estate? Finance? Somebody's got a real job in here. When you see a show on television about a trial that goes like 30 minutes on the TV show, you go, that's ridiculous. That would take 4 years. And they did it in 1 episode. It's the same thing about the art business. It's like the people who are reporting on it don't know what's going on because they haven't done it. Same way if you're watching a show about a hospital and you're a doctor, things don't work like that. So take it, whatever field you're in, you've seen press about it. You have to be like, I don't know, there's some cliche about skepticism or something.
Okay.
Do we have time for
I'm
questions?
sure there's a doctor and lawyer here. They're just
Can we get some questions?
You want to go to questions? Yeah, sure. Should we go? Let's do questions. Gibt es irgendwelche Fragen? Are there any questions? This is your chance to speak.
One over. Was that you waving, or no? You were. Is that a? Believe me, American people was hard to ask questions before we'd even started.
Okay.
No questions. Okay.
Should I give you a
You
question?
can give me a question. I'll give you a question.
Okay. Why'd you close your gallery?
Generally, a 90% drop in revenue is not a good business model for success. So in the early 90s, the art market crashed. The art market was maybe 5% the size. I'd say 3 of the top 10 collectors in the world died. Pace Gallery became Pace Wildenstein. They almost went out of business. And so also the prices were so low compared to the operation. I look back at there's an artist I used to show named Lorna Simpson. Anybody heard of her? She shows with Hauser and Wirth. Her average work now is $400,000. When I showed her, the average price was $4,000. I sold 150 of them. 150 times 4,000, 600,000. 150 times 400,000 is $60 million. So the revenue that you can make to sustain your business is so much higher now, and the fixed costs haven't gone up the same amount. So it was,
I mean that correction of the early '90s or the art market crash. It was really, it really had a terrible effect on Cologne, on art Cologne, because it happened at the same time that the art market, that the country was reunified. Suddenly you had a new center in Berlin and a new generation. I mean, generational generations do have an impact as well. What for one generation is the establishment, the doors are kind of shut for the new generation. So the new generation has to do their own thing.
but 90% of like restaurants go out of business.
Yeah.
90% of galleries after 5, 10, 20 years go out of business. It's a natural phenomenon. The work is so hard, the pay is bad, and it's just that part of then there's a new generation that comes and says, well, I can do that. And they don't know anything which is useful. I mean, when I opened my gallery, I didn't know anybody who collected art. Anybody think that's a stupid idea besides me in retrospect? But I was young and naive. It's like, okay, I know a bunch of artists. I'll do that. It's like, right now you would start with, well, I know a bunch of rich people. I'll open a gallery. That's not a good reason. So it's a different time. But young people filter it through.
Cool. Well, seems I got busier.
Seems like the 5 o'clock talk is like,
Is
there another
are you
talk?
okay?
I'm good. We can keep going.
Oh, sure. Okay. So, which artist did you represent? Or who was your most successful artist that you worked with in retrospect?
I'll start it because I always see the bad side. Some of the best shows I ever did, no one asked the price. So there's an important artist in America who died a long time ago named Gordon Matta Clark.
Oh, yeah.
It's like I did a show. No one had done a show in a gallery in 20 years. So I do this show and working with the widow, and I have all these great objects. Now they sell it 100 times what I was asking then. No one, in 6 weeks, no one said, how much is that drawing? Okay. That's like, I'm proud of that show. So I did another show, a guy named Jamie Reed. It was all the original artwork for the Sex Pistols. The original God Save the Queen, not the poster. No one asked the price. So those kinds of things, success is internal. I would say the projects that I'm most proud of working on, there's an artist named Chris Burden, who, very important artist. He died maybe 5 or 10 years ago. And I worked on projects that he just had a little tiny conception, and I got them built and installed and into museums. So I think I'm proud of the hundreds of museum shows that I helped artists do, managing careers of artists. That's important. Right now, galleries are pretty much sales platforms. That's their role. The artists now sort of take care of their own business. They might have managers. There's a big ecosystem there. They can take care of things. themselves because they can have a big staff. So the gallery's role is twofold. One, to do an exhibition so all your artist friends can see it, and to sell. And the role of the art fairs changed. When I was doing art fairs, my artists were like, "Why are you doing that?" It's like now they'd be like, "What do you mean you're not taking my work to the fair?" And I never broke even on an art fair. I saw it as marketing and advertising. Now it is a critical part of the business model for staying in business, is doing the right number of art fairs with the right work to make sure it's Christmas yesterday.
Interesting. The yeah.
How many people go to Art Basel in Paris? Is Paris going to replace Basel? Daniel?
I don't know. I mean, what I did notice, it seems that the interest in London, in Frieze London, has kind of slowed down. It seems. I heard from a lot of people that Americans came for the last day of Frieze, went to Paris early to see the institutional shows, and then to visit the opening of Paris Plus. But, like galleries have an average lifespan of 5 years, art fairs also have a average lifespan of about 15 years. So everything comes in waves. I think it's super fascinating because you opened your gallery at a time when the market really exploded. And it was the really first time that the art market really went into the stratosphere with insane prices. I remember Mary Boone selling. It seems to have been the galleries that were determining the high prices then, and it wasn't going to the auction houses because the auction houses wouldn't touch work that wasn't older than 10 years, or they wouldn't do like what they.
The auction business was a wholesale business for dealers, and then it became a retail business. So that changed. So it was hundreds of years of being a place, and that's an informational thing. If I buy something at in May at Sotheby's, and then I bring it to Basel in June, people know how much I paid for it.
Yeah.
Though I can't charge the same. In the old days, you could do that,
Yeah.
and people didn't know what we did, so you could ask what you want.
Yeah. What is it? Would you say the art market in the 80s was bigger than the art market today, or have we surpassed the level, the height of the 80s art market?
In the 80s, out of the Fortune 100 CEOs, I'd say maybe 2 of them collected contemporary art. If you looked at the Fortune 100 CEOs now, I'd say 98 of them have expensive art on their walls now, that it became part of what you do. So it's exponentially bigger.
Yeah.
It's global in ways it never was, whether it's the Middle East or the Far East. And it's all the people who have the bug kept the bug. So guys who are like 85 and Aachen are still at it in the same way that some, new guy from Abu Dhabi will start tomorrow. It's like, it's just much more dangerous to drop $1 million than to drop $10,000. It's like, my clients bought works for $5,000 and sold it for $30 million. If you think that's going to happen again, you're wrong. On the other hand, you can spend a lot of money poorly. And it's much more of a economic game than it used to be. We're getting a signal.
Okay, I think now comes the next talk. So
Okay. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Josh, for
Thank you.
coming. Ah.